and welcome to the Shepherds and Kings podcast. My name is Jacob Trelaw, and I'm the founder and the host of this podcast. And today we're going to talk about the topic of intentionality. If this is your first time joining us, thanks for tuning in. And if you've listened before, thanks for coming back. One of the reasons I like David so much is his passion, but that he does what he does on purpose. He lives with intention. One of the most famous stories, of course, of David is him killing the giant Goliath. But a phrase that a lot of people know from that story, David says, "Is there not a cause?" Clearly, David is a man who lives with a reason. He's got a purpose for everything that he does. And we're going to try to talk about that a little bit today, that we as men need a purpose. God gave us a purpose in the garden. He gave us some work to do. He gave us a family to take care of. But somewhere along the line, often we lose our way, or we get lost in the minutia of how to do each of those things on purpose. We don't know how to do our work maybe on purpose, or we don't live in our marriage purposely. We don't take purposeful steps towards growth. But everything we need to do should have a reason behind it. Whether sometimes it's rest. We need to purposely rest or purposely have fun. But we need to be men that live actively or on purpose, not passively. I like the advertisement. I think it must be Dodge that grab life by the horns. That we don't let life necessarily happen to us. We go out and make things happen. I realize, of course, that there are a lot of things that are beyond our control. So I'm not telling you to go try to change things that are beyond your power to change. But there are plenty of things that are within your grasp. God has given you a spouse, maybe, or a job. He's maybe has given you a ministry. Maybe he's given you kids. And each of those things he's given to you to steward and to make into the best possible version of that. And again, you may not see huge growth in that. You know, one of the things I like about the story of Naboth and his vineyard, he just said, I want this because my father gave it to me. And it's precious because my father gave it to me. He didn't say, I have plans to make it into a big commercial venue. He was just going to take it and do the best he can with it and pass it on to the next person. And so that's where we're at, but we still need to do that on purpose. Naboth clearly was a man with purpose and with intention. I'm also not talking about getting ahead of God or not yielding to his leading. You know, like I'm going to take the reins of my life and I'm going to take charge and I'm going to, just do whatever it is that I want to do. Of course, we need to be surrendered to him. But in that, we should not be passive in the things that we know to do. We should be intentional in living our life. We need to be like Jonathan, charging up the hill saying, it may be that the Lord will work for us. I can't sit here anymore and not do anything. I am not going to let someone else do what needs to be done. I'm going to take charge. I'm going to do what I know that I need to do. It's surprising to me how many times I find myself letting someone else take the lead on something for the sole reason of me not having responsibility of the outcome of that situation. It's nice to sometimes work in a place where you can say, oh, it's that person's decision, go talk to them, and to not have to take that responsibility. But there are some areas that God has given us that we don't have that luxury. If you are a man, it's your job to lead your household. You are not given the luxury to pass that responsibility on to someone else. You need to be intentional about that. And I fear that a lot of men in general, are in the same boat, and I get it. We get tired of holding the reins. We have a lot of responsibilities. You go to work and you make a ton of decisions. You try to provide for your family. You try to take care of the house. You try to keep food on the table and clothes on the kids' backs, and also provide a good quality of life for them. You want them to enjoy their time. But often we try to compromise then and hand off control in some areas because of the pressure of having control of all those things. We don't put as much thought as we need to in our marriage relationship because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so our relationship is fine. My wife and I aren't fighting. And so I'm not going to put any purposeful, intentional work into it because things are fine. I'm not going to put any intention into my job because I'm getting paid fine. My boss likes me. I'm doing a good job. It's easy work, whatever it is. And so we're not intentional in the way that we live. We're not intentional in our actions. We're not intentional in our spirituality. But so much of these things happen on purpose. Forgiveness happens on purpose. Remembering happens on purpose. Being courageous happens on purpose. Meditating on God's words happens on purpose. Seeking first the kingdom of God happens on purpose. Surrendering to God happens on purpose with intention. And so we need to live intentionally, taking control of the things that are ours to control. Men, let's avoid passivity. Let's be active in all that God has called us to do. Being active, thinking active, having an active outlook on life takes work. I know it does. But the alternative is really grim. Because if you hand off control of your kids or hand off that living with a purpose, your kids will be maybe without a guide. And again, your kids are doing good in school. Their relationships seem to be good. They're not, necessarily straining their relationship with you. So why put work into it? And again, I get that. We sometimes hand off things where we can. I will let my wife make that decision. I'll let my boss decide that. But we cannot live without intention. As men, we need to have a plan. I realize that's really broad and that's really general, but have a plan for as many things as possible. Do you have a survival plan for a nuclear disaster? Our world is shut down at the moment in a lot of cases, and do you have a plan for what would happen if you couldn't get food for your family? Do you have a financial plan for recession or job loss? Do you have a plan for raising your child? Do you have a plan for house maintenance? Do you have a plan for spiritual temptation? Do you have a plan for how you'd like to grow this year? And that's just scratching the surface. And you're probably thinking like I am, that sounds like a lot of work. That is a ton to have a plan for. But you know what they say, that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's what having a plan is. Having a plan is living intentionally. It could be work, but if you don't have a plan, I heard a quote once, you are a part of someone else's plan. We see in Luke 14:28 the example of a man who makes a plan. He counts the cost before he builds something. Men, everything we do is going to have a cost. The cost of a poorly chosen or unintentional word to your wife might not be visible right away, but there is a cost. There's also a cost of planning on saying the right words. But again, planning ahead, the cost is a lot less than trying to make up for something stupid that you said. Your church attendance, your words, your time spent at work, your money spent on hobbies, your food choices, your friends, they all have a cost. We need to try to anticipate what that cost might be and be intentional about making the right choice. Of course, as I've already been saying, be careful of making plans that aren't according to what the Bible says or what you know God has for your life. I know that God has called you to make a difference, and I know that those who make a difference are those who take action. And I know that those who take action are those who plan, so therefore, I make a plan. So I don't know what your roles are or all the areas that you need to be planning in, but have a plan. We don't like necessarily dealing in like hypotheticals, or I don't want to have a plan for something that might never happen. Like the odds of a nuclear disaster maybe are lower now than they were. I don't know. But so why should I have a plan for that? First of all, hypothetical thinking is a great mental exercise. But second of all, you never know. There are some things, first of all, that we do know that we should be planning for anyway. But why not plan for something that you know could happen that would just take a little bit of work? But what are some practical things that we can do to live intentionally? What are some specific steps that we can take? Well, first of all, write it down. For the things that we know must be done, for the plans we have to make, write it down. Do it decently and in order. Writing something down creates multiple links in the brain for the information that you're writing. If you don't write it down, the odds are that you will forget. That's how I am. I've gotten up in the middle of the night and written things down because I would have forgotten it otherwise. Or even I've had a conversation with someone, walked out of the room, and had to walk back in and say, now, what did I need to do again? Because I was thinking of something else and I didn't write it down. But we are not going to live intentionally if it's not written down. Handwriting something can help you remember it even better as opposed to typing it. But revisiting these plans, these goals, whatever it is, this living intentionally on a specific basis, whether weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever it is, write it down. If it's a way that you want to treat your wife or a creed that you want to have for your house, write it down and hang it up for your family so they know what you want them to live by. If it's, some sort of disaster reaction plan, write it down and hang it up. You see, like in a hospital, the sheet of paper you can grab off the wall, say, here's how to react to this particular thing. It's not a bad idea to have something like that in your house, but whatever it is, write it down. Another practical step you can take, and this seems like a small thing, but enter each room intentionally. Each time you enter a room, it's sort of like a clean slate. It's a new chance to treat your spouse the right way. It's an opportunity for your work presentation to have no baggage. Sit in the garage for 2 minutes before you enter your home and interact with your kids. Enter it intentionally. When you come across that threshold, say, here is what is going to happen on the other side. Now, does it happen that way every time? No. You may be walking into a problem that you have no idea of, but if you purpose to enter that room intentionally, the odds are that it will happen more like you purpose for it to happen. If you pray and plan and imagine what you're going to do, for example, when you get home, how you're going to act towards your kids and towards your spouse, that first 5 minutes that you spend with them when you get home from work can be setting the tone for the rest of the day. The first 5 minutes that you spend with any person can set the tone for that relationship or for that day or for whatever it is, but enter that room intentionally. Enter church intentionally. Enter a new interaction with someone intentionally. Here's what I expect to get from church. Here is how I expect this conversation to go. Here is how I'm going to treat this person. Here's what I think I can learn today. Here's what I'm going to do to better myself today. Enter that room intentionally. Next, we can prepare. Living intentionally, we already talked about, takes preparation, takes some work. And this is sort of like having a plan, but waiting until your kids misbehave to figure out how you're going to discipline them really reduces the odds to you doing it poorly, or at least not as well as you could have, because you didn't do it intentionally. You didn't prepare for that. Something as simple as preparing your clothes the night before. Think through a tough conversation before you have it. If you anticipate someone saying something to you, think about how you're going to react to that situation. Living intentionally, living on purpose. Say, I know this person is going to probably bring this up, so here is how I'm going to react. That's living on purpose. Proverbs 24:27 says, prepare thy work without. Getting ready for what's coming. And that's living intentionally. I love the quote, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. That's preparing. You know what? I'd rather be over-prepared than under-prepared and not ready. On a small scale, prepare for your meeting at work. Prepare your heart to hear a sermon. But think about these things that are going to happen in your life beforehand. Be intentional. Next, be intentional with your time. Keep track of your time. What I mean is, don't let being intentional with your work take away from your kids. If you have a project you're working on at home, set the timer and then stop when the timer goes off. Don't let time slip away from you because you didn't keep track of it. Ephesians 5:16 encourages